Time comes in the life of every race when people are driven by echoes of the past to chart a course for an exalted future. Africa is at this threshold, as major actors in the Africa arena plot a renaissance towards common destiny. Let's pedal across the streams of yesterday, from the backstreets of Africa to the defining roles of policymakers, the political realities of the African nation, balance of power, and the strive to sustain national interest and identity. Join us on Network Africa on Channels Television. Network Africa, the rallying point for the emergence of a new Africa.
Hello and welcome to Network Africa. I am Adeshewa Josh. This week, United States accuses Sudan of turning the bullets on its citizens. Then fresh wave of attack hits Kenyan villages of Mpeketoni and Poromoko 2 days in a row as gunmen kill at least 60 people. Also abducting women. Al-Shabaab claims responsibility, but government says is politically motivated. Almost 2 years after the attack on U.S. consulate in Benghazi, U.S. forces captures alleged mastermind Ahmed Abu Khattala. Libyan diplomats condemned the operation, saying it is an infringement on Libya's sovereignty. Explosion rocks football viewing center in Damaturu, Yobe State, northeast Nigeria, killing at least 7 people. And finally, hypnosis or anesthesia. Which would you choose? Guinean singer Alama Kante chose hypnosis for her throat surgery. Details when we come back from the break. Do join us again. On Tuesday, June the 17th, an explosion ripped through a football viewing center in Damaturu, northeast Nigeria, as fans gathered to watch the World Cup game. The blast occurred in the Nayinawa area of the state capital of Yobe at about 8 p.m., while football fans in the state were watching the game between Brazil and Mexico. At least 7 people were confirmed dead, even as residents thronged the General Sani Abacha Specialist Hospital, where the injured are being treated.
The scene here speaks for itself. Remnants of a destruction so mind-boggling, most wonder what could possibly want to make anyone destroy human lives so easily and without remorse. The body parts here are so grotesque that few on seeing this will be able to hold a meal down. The General Sani Abacha Specialist Hospital. This is where the dead and the survivors were taken to after the bomb went off. The pain is definitely intense, but it could have been worse. Some others died, but at least these ones, in spite of the pain, are alive to tell their story.
Kaicin takaitawa ni dai abin da na iya gani, abin da kuma na sani a kai shine mun zo shago za mu ajiye kayanmu a firiza, sai ga bayan Allah sun zo a napep sun zo sun faka. Fakawansu ke da wuya 'yan mintuna ne tsakani, kawai sai muka ji wannan abu ya riga da ya faru.
Ya tani na tsaya sayar da charge card kawai abin ya tashi, ban san daga yamma ba ne arewa ne kudu a ban sani ba, kawai ya tashi na ji abu ya bugi kafa na yanda na yi din na jan gindi na da mene na je tasha.
Mun zo wucewa ne muka tsaya sayar charge card daidai gurin da abin ya faru, to muna nan daidai daga kudu da mu kafin mu hankara abu ya riga faru. Kaga kowa ta kansa zai yi, ba zai tsaya ta abin da yake faruwa ba. Mu dai muna godiyan Allah da ya sanya rayuwar mu bata kare akan haka ba, idan wanda na so rayuwar ta kare Allah ji kansu daga fara.
As the survivors recount their experience, the state government, represented by the deputy governor, makes an entrance. Government, like many others, condemns this heinous act and goes on to offer its assistance to the victims. The Yobe state government also wants the federal government to intensify the war against terror in the country.
I would like also to seize this opportunity to call on the security personnel not to deter not to despair. They should remain focused and pursue our goal of finding the bad people around us. This thing has been going on for a very long time. Let's endure. Inshallah, it will come to an end.
But truly, for the people of Yobe State and other states in the northeast region, watching football at a viewing center appears to be a dangerous pastime. Once again, the ball is in the court of the authorities to secure the lives of its vulnerable citizens.
The United States has expressed concerns about Sudan's treatment of its citizens in the process of fighting insurgents. Well, this conflict against ethnic minority rebels has been going on in Libya for about 3 years, and according to the United Nations, it has affected more than 1 million people. Samantha Power, as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, condemned in the strongest possible terms bombardments of civilians that she claimed were being carried out by the Sudanese government and its rapid support forces. According to Power, since April, not only have ground attacks on and the shelling of civilian populations increased, but the government of Sudan has intensified its air campaign, dropping hundreds of barrel bombs and other ordnance in Sudanese towns and villages, deliberately targeting hospitals and schools. Apparently, Ms. Power was reportedly tipped off by a coalition of 46 organizations providing humanitarian or supporting peace efforts in Sudan, who wrote to the United Nations Security Council, African Union, and Arab League, demanding an end to attacks on civilians. Well, the aid groups accused the military of looting and destroying food and water supplies in areas recaptured by rebels. The uptick in violence in South Kordofan and Blue Nile has displaced or even severely affected approximately 1.2 million people. It has also increased the population's vulnerability to disease and malnutrition, and it has disrupted planting cycles, which only compounds food insecurity in that region. I'm now being joined by John Tanza of the Voice of America. Thanks a lot, John, for joining us on Network Africa.
Adesewa, thank you very much for having me on the program.
Now, going by the headlines, it is very easy to ask why the Sudan government forces are bombing its own citizens in these areas.
Sudan government has been on, lots of headline news about its forces and some proxy militia fighting alongside Sudan government, attacking villages in southern Kordofan, and even in Darfur. There have been lots of stories, citing Sudan government forces attacking civilians. It's not clear why they attack civilians, but in a war zone, the habit is always when government troops take control of an area, they assume everybody is part of the rebels or everybody is part of the insurgent. And so in that process, civilians might become victims of any, fighting.
Well, for the past 3 years, Sudan government has been at war with some ethnic minority rebels believed to be backed by South Sudan. Is the government apprehensive, or is it indeed protecting the state against terrorists?
Well, talking about protecting the state is an overstatement. The government in Khartoum has not been, protecting its own civilians. There are examples of what has been happening in southern Kordofan, in Blue Nile State, and in Darfur, where civilians are forced to flee from areas that are controlled by Sudan government forces. And so that clearly tells you that the government is not protecting their own civilians, and civilians are afraid to go to places where government troops are.
Well, Sudan has also accused the United Nations of double standards. In fact, a Sudan spokesman accused the U.S. of keeping mute when the UN office was attacked by rebels in Kadugli. Can it be said that both sides of the divide are guilty of terror against citizens?
Well, Sudan government has been doing what you would call in a typical conflicting situation, face saving. They're saving their face by blaming other countries like the United States, or blaming Israel all the time, saying Israel and the United States are against them. But the truth of the matter is that they have failed to address their own issues in Sudan, the rebellions in Darfur, in southern Kordofan, and in Blue Nile, and for the larger part, the rebellion that has been there in South Sudan before South Sudan became a separate nation is as a result of Khartoum's lack of being inclusive, Khartoum's lack of democratic space, and hence lots of other people from the other parts of the country, east, north, west, and east, took up arms to fight the government. And so for the government to blame other countries, that is just face-saving.
Back to the fundamental issue. Is the Arab-dominated government in Sudan sensitive to the non-Arab minority in that country?
There is no sensitivity there. In fact, the government in Khartoum that is made predominantly of the